Hello friends, welcome back. Myself Pushpender Singh, and today we are going to start with our daily current affairs. So today you have 8th of June 2021, and these lectures are basically based on the current affairs, the daily current affairs, and we are referring the two national newspapers, the Hindu or Indian Express. You can also subscribe and read those newspapers. Apart from that, you can also subscribe our channel on the YouTube for these lectures, which are entirely based on the current affairs. So you can supplement your preparation with the help of these lectures. Alright, so let's begin with the lecture. Okay, so first news is all about the language Malayalam. So in Delhi hospital or Delhi government hospital basically banned its nursing staff from talking or from speaking in the Malayalam language. That was reported in the Govind Vallabhan hospital, that is also known as the JIPMER, right? In the Jipmer Hospital in Delhi, which is a government hospital, have banned right the nursing staff to speak in the Malayalam in the hospital premises, right? And it has also given the stern warning to all such the staff who speaks specifically in the Malayalam language, and they have to supposed to speak in English or in a Hindi language within the premises of the hospital. Okay, so this basically infuriated various sections of the society, including the Kerala people, because the Malayalam is basically the official language in the Kerala, right? And Kerala is having the highest level of the human development as well as the literacy rate in our country. So speaking in Malayalam language in the hospital premises, right, is not something not something odd, right? It should be allowed unless and until it is affecting the delivery of the services to the basically patients. Otherwise, what is the problem of speaking in the Malayalam in the hospital premises if it is not affecting the service delivery to the patients? So Malayalam is a Dravidian language which is spoken in few of the South Indian states. For example, it is having the official language status in the state of Kerala, in the Union Territory of Lakshadweep, as well as in the Union Territory of Pondicherry, specifically in the Mahe. So you have Mahe, Karaikal, Yanam, and Pondicherry, which are basically the four districts belong to the Union Territory of Pondicherry. Specifically in the Mahe, right? This Malayalam is having the official language status. Okay, and the Malayalam is also one of the 22 the scheduled language which have been recognized by the constitution of our country, right? And it has been spoken almost by 2.88 percentage of the Indian population. Okay, and as you know that a lot of people from the Kerala, specifically from the southern state, basically are working in the Persian Gulf in the some of the Gulf nations, and the Malayalam is basically the widely spoken language in the Gulf countries because of such expatriate communities, specifically residing in the Gulf nation, say in the Saudi Arabia and the Gulf countries, right? And the Malayalam was also designated as a classical language in our country. Okay, it was designed as a classical language in our country. So currently you have the six languages which are having this classical language status, right? For example, the Tamil, which was recognized as a first classical language in our country way back in 2004. Then Sanskrit, okay, it was recognized as a classical language in 2005. Then Kannada, the Kannada was recognized as a classical language in 2008. Then you have Telugu. Telugu was recognized in 2008 itself. Then Malayalam, which was recognized in 2013. Okay, and recently the Odia, which was speaking in Odisha, right? It was recognized in 2014. Recently, there was also demand to include the Marathi, right? To include the Marathi in the classical languages status in our country, but there was no such addition that was done for that purpose. Okay. Next, you have G7 corporate tax deal. So here, what is happening is that I'll give you a brief background. There are a lot of multinational companies, right? These multinational companies are those companies which are basically working their businesses in the in the different countries. So they have their operations in the various countries. So that is why they are called multinational companies. So here what is happening is that these companies are regularly shifting, right? Their bases, their offices, right? Depending upon the corporate tax which is being imposed on them in a particular country. So if anywhere in any part of the country, right? If any place in any place, right? If the corporate tax is lower, definitely these companies would like to shift their operations specifically to those destinations where the corporate rate tax is lower, right? Definitely to earn more profit because of lesser corporate tax. So that is basically causing problems to some of the world developed countries like USA, right? The USA where almost topmost multinational companies are headquartered, right? But what is happening is that there are a lot of destinations or there are a lot of countries which are providing the nil or very less corporate tax on those multinational companies. So which is basically becoming the most attractive destinations. So recently, the most advanced economies, which belongs to the G7 grouping, have reached a historic consensus regarding to impose a corporate tax, that is the uniform corporate tax that should be imposed on all sort of a multinational companies wherever they work. So this deal is announced, right, by involving, right, the G7 nations that involve US, UK, Germany, France, Canada, Italy, and Japan, right? And this proposal or this historical deal is likely to put before the G20 meeting in the month of July 2021. So here, the corporation tax or the corporate tax that we are talking is a direct tax, okay, that is levied on the net income or the net profit of a corporate entity from their businesses, right, or from their from their foreign or domestic, agencies. Here, the group of seven that we are talking is basically an informal club. It's just an informal club, right, of the wealthy democracies consisting of, I told you, the seven countries, that is Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, and United Kingdom, apart from the United States of America. Right here, the heads of the government of the member states belongs to the G7 nations, right, as well as the representatives of the European Union. They meet regularly at an annual summit of the G7, right? Okay. And regarding G20 meetings, the G20 basically is an international forum. It's an international forum, okay, of the basically governments, and it involved basically the central bank governors also from 19 countries plus the European Union. And India is also part of this 19 countries. So India is a member of G20, but India is not a member of G7. Okay. So the background I have given you is that the decision was taken during G7 meeting is that almost all multinational companies has to undergo, they have to pay the tax, right? This uniform tax will be applicable, right? The global minimum corporate tax will be applicable to all multinational companies to counter, some sort of the possibilities of countries, right, to attract their investment. Definitely, if there is a lesser corporate tax, these companies will shift their base. These companies will shift their, offices, they shift their operations specifically to those low tax destinations. All right. So it is basically involved in some sort of a counter tax avoidance procedure, right? So here to avoid the tax, these counter tax avoidance, the procedure has to be implemented by the G7 countries in order to force those multinational companies to pay the tax, at least bare minimum, the global minimum corporate tax they should pay to counter any such possibilities of moving out their bases from the developed nations. Okay, here the suggestion which was first, given by the USA, right, the decision to ratify this 15% of the floor rate, right, that is basically, involve a war on the low tax jurisdictions. These low tax jurisdictions, like Singapore and various other island nations where almost nil tax or low tax jurisdictions are there, okay, which basically attract those multinational companies to their nations, and definitely by that process they won or they basically gain in terms of the foreign resources, in terms of the foreign revenues, right? And definitely they are earning, a lot of money out of that. So here they urge, The USA basically urged world 20 leaders or in the G20 leaders nations to move in the direction to adopting the the bare minimum global corporate income tax, right, in the month of April itself. Okay. Now here, it is basically to put a minimum rate in place of, the 30-year race to the bottom. So here, if you see the basically the declining trend of this corporate tax from 1980, I have one graph, so I'll show you that graph. So from 1980 to 1990 to 2010 and 2020, if you see these years, almost you have the declining graph of the corporate tax. So corporate tax has been slashing definitely to attract these multinational corporations in their respective countries. So US proposal was basically a higher, that was 21%. The minimum corporate tax was not accepted. Ultimately, it was decided by the consensus that at least the global minimum corporate tax should be 15% during G7 meeting. Right? Definitely, the US proposal was based on that if the particular country do not have this global bare minimum corporate tax, right? Definitely, right? That will, that should also cancel some sort of exemptions that was given to the income that is being accruing from those countries that do not legislate this bare minimum tax to discourage any sort of a shifting of these multinational operations and the profit overseas. So in short, you can say that if any country do not legislate on this bare minimum global corporate tax, right, the country should adopt, or the host country should adopt, any sort of a methods like cancelling of these exemptions related to income, right, that has been accrued from shifting of this operation from one country to the another country. So that exemptions in terms of income would be cancelled out in that process. Okay. So here you could understand that the corporate income tax has been slashed to attract these multinational companies across the world. So here in 1980, you could see that more than 40%, right, of the corporate tax that was paid by the corporate entities to the government, it was slowly slashed down to 35 percentage, right? Or even below the 35 percentage even in 1990, right? If you see in the year of 2000, it was almost, let's say 32 percentage. If you see in 2010, it is again reaching to almost 25% or 24%. And again 2020, it was at least 15%. The tax will be there. So it is a global consensus among the G7 countries that should have this at least global, the minimum corporate tax that should be at least 15% across all the countries, right? It can be more than that also. Okay. Next, Jal Shakti Mission. So Jal Shakti Mission was launched by the Ministry of Jal Shakti, right? It was launched by the Ministry of Jal Shakti in the year of 2019, right? First, let us understand the news. Then we will go through the background of Jal Shakti Mission. So here, the government of India or the Ministry of Jal Shakti has decided to speed up this projects, or implementation of the Jal Jeevan Mission, right? Specifically in the 5 northwestern states. These northwestern states are there, right, in the Punjab, Haryana, Himachal Pradesh, Jammu and Kashmir, and Ladakh, right? In those 5 northwestern states, right, there will be a speeder, or a speeden, the implementation of this Jal Shakti Mission or Jal Jeevan Mission will be done, right? So here the five states where the target is to provide the tapped water connection by the year of 2022, right, would be provided, and that is basically the goal of the Ministry of Jal Shakti, instead of by the year of 2024. So Jal Shakti Abhiyan, right, or Jal Shakti Mission, that was launched by the Ministry of Jal Shakti in the year of 2019, that we are talking, it's a campaign for for water conservation, right, and the water security in the country through some sort of a collaborative efforts of various ministries of the government of India with the governments of states. So the focus of this campaign is on some sort of a water stress districts and the blocks. For example, in the last year itself, almost Jal Shakti Abhiyan have covered 256 water stress districts across the country. Okay, here these 5 northwestern districts that are Punjab, Haryana, Himachal Pradesh, Jammu and Kashmir, and Ladakh would be provided. Every rural household will be provided this tapped water connection by the year of 2022. It's a speeder, the implementation of this Jal Jeevan Mission for that purpose. and how could this Jal Shakti mission basically, having intervened in those water scarce districts or water scarce districts. Here, some sort of various conservation interventions have been imposed. For example, water conservation and rainwater harvesting, then renovation of traditional and other water bodies, like you have, burns, or you have kundas or something like that. Then reuse of water or recharging of the structure so that the water level could go up. The watershed development, as well as along with the intensive afforestation program, was also done in those states. Here, to enable these states, specifically these northwestern states, and to achieve this goal by year of 2022 itself instead of 2024, the Union Ministry of Jal Shakti has approved the central allocation of 8,216 crore rupees in the year of 2021-22. This 8,216 rupees is almost 4 times the allocation to those states, to these 5 states, that was done in 2020-21. So you could understand that instead of 2024, the Ministry of Jal Shakti is eyeing on completion of this capped water connection to every rural household by the year of 2022 instead of 2024, and for that purpose, it has hiked, the center allocation for that Jal Jeevan Mission to 8,216 crore rupees. That is almost 4 times of the allocation that was there in the last financial year, in the year of 2020-21. Okay, so definitely this is a massive increase in the allocation to speed up this implementation of the Jal Jeevan Mission, specifically in these 5 northwestern states. Okay. Next, the sustainable public procurement. Okay, so here what is happening is that, right, the Department of the Commerce, right, in association with the United Nations Environmental Program, has launched this sustainable public procurement. This sustainable public procurement is basically, it's a process through which public authorities, right, it's a public procurement. So you understand that it's a process simply through which the public authorities, okay, seeks to achieve, some sort of an appropriate balance between, between economic development, social development, and environmental development. So you have 3 pillars, or you have 3 objectives: the economic development, right, you have the social development, as well as your environmental development, right. So you have to balance these 3 pillars of the sustainable development. So the procurement of those public authorities would be done in such a way that, right, such a way that it should have this balance in the economic development, social development, and environmental development. If that balance is not, adopted, definitely you will have the environmental degradation or environmental loss. So on the occasion of the World Environmental Day, the new product category was added to the government e-marketplace, right? That is a new product category that is called the green room air conditioners. So that means in the list of the government e-marketplace, that is a portal, a new product category, that is green room air conditioners, was basically launched, right, on the occasion of the World Environment Day, right, by the Department of Commerce with the association of United Nations Environmental Program. So here the government e-marketplace, or GEM, that we are talking is basically, it's a portal, it's simple, it's an online platform for the public procurement in India, right? So this initiative that was launched in the year of 2016, right, by the Ministry of Commerce and Industry, with the objective to create some sort of an open and a transparent procurement platform for the government buyers. So here that we are talking about this e-government or government e-marketplace portal will enable and encourage all the central and the state government agencies, because it's a public procurement. So here all the central and government agencies, right, would be involved to buy efficient and environment friendly this green room air conditioners, right. Thereby the sustainable public procurement process would be speeded up in the Indian context also. So it's a first time the Department of Commerce have recognized the potential of the government e-marketplace, right, that the buyers have the option to choose this green and sustainable products and the services which are available with the government e-marketplace, right. Here that will have the positive externalities, right, that derives some sort of innovations right, in that process, and that provides some sort of a financial saving to the government buyers also, and definitely that will help in the environmental upgradation also, and we are closely moving towards the circular economy in that framework. Okay, so here the green room air temperatures is basically providing some sort of a the sustainable products, right? Choose like green and sustainable products that will be available on the sustainable public procurement on the government e-marketplace. All right, and the initiatives in India for the purpose of sustainable public procurement that was taken, for example, in March 2018, the Ministry of Finance constituted a task force for the sustainable public procurement, right? And which has basically given the mandate to provide the balanced development, specifically in the social, in the economic, as well as in the environmental development. So these pillars should be balanced, right? And that type of development will be called the sustainable public procurement. Here, the United Nations Environmental Program basically supporting the Ministry of Commerce in the sustainable public procurement initiative, right? And initially it was focusing on the three prioritized products categories, that is the paper, disinfectant, and the green room air conditioners. These are available on the government e-marketplace for the purpose of sustainable public procurement, initiative that was launched by the government of India, right, in that respect. Okay. Next, iFamilia. iFamilia is basically, it's a database or new global database that was recently launched by the Interpol. Recently launched by the Interpol. Interpol means International Police Organization, right? That is commonly known as Interpol. So Interpol has recently launched a global database that is known as iFamilia. The main purpose of launching this global database is to find out the missing persons, is to identify these missing persons across the world, right? As well as if there is a human remains, right? Of or if there is a dead body or any sort of human remains, we will try to identify, right, with those database with the help of the DNA of the relatives, right? So that database is known as iFamilia. So iFamilia is a global database that would provide some sort of a database related to the missing persons as well as unidentified human remains with the help of the DNA. Right here, the international organization basically facilitate the international police cooperation against any sort of a broad cross-border terrorism, trafficking, and other crimes across the world. So here, the full name is basically the Interpol. That full name is the International Criminal Police Organization. Its full name is International Criminal Police Organization, or it is known as, in short, it is also known as International Police Organization, or in short, you can also say Interpol, right? It is basically an intergovernmental organization which is consisting of around 194 member countries, right? And here, right, the Interpol basically helps, to all of these 194 countries to work together, right, to make the world peace. And here the Palestine, which is also a member of Interpol. Okay, and here how would the Interpol basically helps, right, in those process? It will basically enable, right, the countries to share and access data specifically on the crimes and the criminals, right? So here the Interpol will basically offer lot of technical and operational supports to the countries. So here the General Secretariat coordinates basically the day-to-day activities, right, related to the Interpol to fight the range of crimes. Okay, and here it is basically run by the Secretary General and staffed basically by the police and the civilians, right? And it is basically headquartered in the Lyon in the France. Okay, and it is not a unit or the part of the United Nations system, but definitely it is basically also, the United Nations General Assembly would also, issue the notice, right, under, the notice category of the Interpol for finding out various people, right, which are also associated with the terrorist, with association with, trafficking or other type of crimes. And it has been founded in the year of 1923, right? Okay. And here, every country, the Interpol will have their own, national center bureau. So this national center bureau would provide, the central point, right, of the contact for the General Secretariat, as well as other national central bureaus. So you can understand this. National Central Bureau is basically, is a basically an agency belongs to a particular country, right? Here the country will declare a national central bureau, which is basically associated with the Interpol, okay, to coordinate the task which is given under Interpol to the various countries. So every country will have their own national central bureau. For example, in our country, India, the CBI is acting as a national central bureau to coordinate the tasks which are related to the Interpol in this aspect. Okay, and here these Interpol notices are basically issued by the request of the member countries. So these Interpol alert and the requests are circulated by the Interpol, allowing the police in the member countries to share the crime related activities. So definitely, for example, if India want any information from, say, from Russia, so it will be basically issuing this notice with the help of this Interpol. Okay, so with the help of this Interpol, the notice will be issued in the Russia with the help of the Russian National Central Bureau. That person will be, found out, and that will be, if needed through the bilateral relations, that person will be, handed over to the Indian authority for the purpose of, investigation of the crime. So here the 8 type of notices which are issued, right? 7 of them which are basically color coded, and the 8th special notice which is issued at the request of United Nations Security Council. The purpose is very, very similar, right? It is to tackle any sort of cross-border terrorism, the trafficking of the humans, as well as other heinous crimes in that respect. Okay, so how would this, that we are talking about iFamilia, which is a database which basically deals with the DNA, right? The DNA technology to find out the the missing persons as well as the unidentified bodies. So here the iFamilia will have the database. Okay, so DNA matching services will be provided. Okay, that will provide a new opportunities for matching of this DNA from an unidentified body or the human remains. Right here, you can directly match with the DNA from the missing person, or you can match the DNA of this person with the basically the biological relatives. Okay, so here the DNA will be matched either from the missing persons, right, with the help of the person's relatives, right, or with the persons of the biological relatives, and this database will definitely help in finding out those persons. Okay. Fine. So let's move the fugitive economic offenders. Okay. So here the fugitive economic offenders bill was passed by the parliament in the year of 2018. Okay. When you have lot of issues related to the money laundering, right? Lot of issues related to the fraud which have been caused on the economy, specifically on the banks. Okay. And here the Union Minister Dr. Jitendra Singh have addressed the special session of the United Nations General Assembly. That special session of the United Nations General Assembly was conducted on the international cooperation to combat the challenges of the fugitive economic offenders and the assets. And it is very shameful for India that almost 4 people, Nirav Modi, Vijay Mallya, then you have the Choksi, right, all have left the country, right, and they are basically hiding in some places in the world, and Indian authorities are unable to get them back to the India for their for their basically prosecution, right? This is another the point to be noted in the context of this fugitive economic offenders. So this bill was passed, right, by both the houses of the parliament in the year of 2018, when the Nirav Modi have led the PNB fraud, right, of worth of more than 12,000 crore rupees, as well as the Vijay Mallya, which have also fled the country to avoid any sort of arrest for the economic fraud, right? So you have Mehul Choksi, Nirav Modi, and Vijay Mallya. These are the 3 economic offenders which have been declared by the competent court. So as you have seen that India has seen the rise of multi-crore economic loss, right, that has been caused because of the willful defaults and the scams, right? You have seen, for example, Vijay Mallya. Okay, the Vijay Mallya was responsible for the loan default worth of around 9,000 crore rupees. So it is basically having the loan default of 9,000 crore rupees. Similarly, the Nirav Modi and Mehul Choksi was responsible for 13,000 crore PNB bank fraud. Okay. Apart from that, the default and the scam itself, the public would keep them in the memory for fleeing the country after being accused the same. Right? As you know that the Mallya or Vijay Mallya is basically currently residing in the United Kingdom. The Nirav Modi and Mehul Choksi is basically moved from various countries, say from Hong Kong to the London to the New York, and continuously they are evading, prosecution. Recently, in the news that Mehul Choksi was arrested in some of, in some of the island country, but still the Indian authorities are unable to get him back to the country for the purpose of prosecution. Okay, the main purpose of the Economic Offenders Act or Economic Offenders Bill is to deter the economic offenders, right? That they can evade the process of the prosecution, or they can evade the having coming into the clutches of the law just by moving outside of the jurisdiction of Indian court. So this Economic Offenders Act basically provides the cross country jurisdiction for the purpose of bringing these economic offenders back to the country for the purpose of prosecution. So here, to ensure that fugitive economic offenders return to India to face action in accordance with the law. Okay, let us understand the salient features of the bill. So here, to define the the fugitive economic offenders, right? Any person who can be defined as a fugitive economic offender, right, who have committed a scheduled offense, right? This scheduled offense is given in the schedule of the bill, that is the Economic Offenders Bill, right, which involve any sort of the crime which amount to around 100 crore rupees or the more, right? And the person has absconded or person has left the country, right, for the purpose of refuse to coming back, right, to the country to avoid or to face the criminal prosecution in our country. So the person has fled, the country to avoid this prosecution. So here, for the purpose of declaring this fugitive economic offenders, a special court have been established, right? This special court have been established under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act 2002, which basically having the provision related to the money laundering, and it was to declare an alleged fraudster or alleged person as a fugitive economic offender. That means it's very simple. This special court have the power to declare the person as the fraudster or fugitive economic offender. Okay. Here, the most important aspect is that a director or the deputy director rank officer, right, under the Prevention of the Money Laundering Act 2002, right, may file an application before the special court. That special court basically is established under the Prevention of the Money Laundering Act 2002, and by the request or by the application of this director or the deputy director, right, this special court may issue the notice, right, to the person, right, on receiving this application and asking the concerned person to appear before the special court within the 6 weeks. Okay, if the person appears in the specified time, the special court will terminate this proceedings and the person will be punished as per the Indian law, under Economic Offenders Act. If the person do not appear before the special court within the 6 weeks, the court or the special court will declare a person as a fugitive economic offender, under the Fugitive Economic Offender Bill. Okay. Here, the appeals from this special court basically lies to the High Court, and further from the High Court to the Supreme Court. Okay. And here, there is no provision for claiming this civil claim, right? So your offender cannot claim this civil claim. So as a section 11 of the Act disqualifies those who declared as offenders from filing or defending any sort of a civil claim in the court. So it has not been possible. So you can see here all such fraudsters, which are also called the fugitive economic offenders in our country. Okay. Next, the Pran Bayu Devta pension scheme, right? As well as the Oxyvens. Oxyvens means the oxygen. Oxygen once. Once means here the forest. It is not when. It is the forest. It is the Hindi term for the forest that is known as one. So oxy is the short form for the oxygen. So oxygen forest, right? So two schemes was recently been launched by the state of Haryana for the purpose of recognizing the contribution by the trees which are having the age of 75 years or more, or specifically recognizing the contributions which are provided by the trees, right? Specifically in the context of providing the oxygen, right? Providing various services, right? Like providing, the fruits, timber, right? Recharging the groundwater, right? And safeguarding the environment, right? And controlling the pollution, etc. A lot of services have been provided. Aesthetic services are also provided by the plants or by the by the trees. So in the amid pandemic that is related to the COVID-19, several states including Haryana have witnessed the crisis of the medical oxygen, and this medical oxygen was critical to save the life of the patients which are severely ill due to the COVID-19, right? So here the Haryana government has decided to protect those forests which are unique, right, in its kind, and which are basically serving the country. So it's a unique in its aspect that this Pran Bayu Devta pension scheme, right, it is being provided as a pension of around 2,500 rupees per tree, right, to basically to the local government for safeguarding this forest or safeguarding these plants or the trees which are 75 years or older. So here, the most important aspect of this Pran Bayu Devta pension scheme is that the state government would provide, the pension to basically specifically to the local bodies, right, to safeguarding those trees whose age is around 75 years and above. So here the state government first of all would conduct a survey, would find out, right, how many trees are older than 75 years, right? And here these trees have basically served the humanity throughout their life, definitely by providing the oxygen, reducing the pollution, providing the shade, providing the fruits, timber, controlling the pollution, right? Environmental clearance, right? All many such services have been provided by those trees. So such trees would be identified throughout the state, and that will involve, by looking after those trees with the help of these local people under this Pran Bayu Devta pension scheme, right? So here, for the maintenance of these trees, which are older than 75 years of the age, a pension that is around 2,500 rupees would be provided. That is per year basis to every tree, to the per year basis to the every tree under this Pran Bayu Devta pension scheme. So here, the tree pension shall continue to increase every year, right, on the lines of the similar old age pension samman pension scheme. Okay. So here, according to the state government officials, right, they have recognized around 2,500 such trees in the state. Okay, they have identified. Here, the forest department have commissioned a survey. Okay, and to identify those older trees which are more than 75 years or which are at least 75 years of the age. Here, the village panchayats, okay, would now be paid around 2,500 rupees, right, as a pension per tree, per year. That means to upkeep the forest, to take care of the forest, to take care of such tree, okay, that is the tree that is at least 75 years and above of the age, right? For that tree, right, the state government would provide that state government would provide the yearly pension, right? That is around 2,500 rupees per tree per year. That pension will be provided to the village panchayat, and village panchayat will look after such tree, right? It is basically to provide the honor to such tree in terms of the services that have been provided by the tree to the serving of this humanity. Okay, this pension is given by the urban local bodies, right, department for the upkeeping of the trees, installing of the plates, right, grills and etc. for the purpose of safeguarding these trees. And that we are talking about this oxy forest, that is the scheme. See, oxyforest, right here, the oxygen forest or oxy one that we are talking will be planted on the land, right, in the state of Haryana, right, on the 5 acres to 100 acres of the land. That means the 5 acres of the 5 acres to the 100 acres of the land in the cities of the Haryana would be selected, and oxy ones are identified, some sort of the pieces of the land on which as many as the 3 crore trees would be planted over the period of the time. Okay, so this oxy ones or the oxygen forest would occupy around 10% of this 8 lakh hectares of the land across the Haryana. So that will occupy almost 8% of the land, right, across the country, across this state of Haryana for that purpose. Okay. Then internet from the sky. So here you must understand that a OneWeb satellite constellation. A OneWeb satellite constellation is basically a planned initiative, okay, to provide or to send at least 648 satellites or roughly 700 satellites in the low Earth orbit. Okay, so OneWeb satellite constellation means a group of satellites. So around 648 group of satellites or the constellation of the satellites will be sent to the low Earth orbit. Okay, and here almost 218 such satellites have been already launched in the low Earth orbit. Recently, 36 such satellites have been launched on the May 28th, right, with the help of this OneWeb low Earth orbit constellation. Okay, now here, which is in the process of being completed by the year of 2022, where almost all 648 satellites will be launched in the low Earth orbit. The ultimate aim from this OneWeb is to provide the global satellite internet broadband services to the people everywhere in every corner of the world, right? It is initially aiming to start the global services in the year of 2021, right? But ultimately, over the period of the time, by the year of 2022, right, the global satellite internet broadband services will be provided to every section of the society. Okay, so here constellation is being deployed by the OneWeb. This OneWeb that is formally it was also known as the World Boo Satellite Limited. Okay, it is a company that was previously known as World Boo Satellite Limited. Right, now it is known as OneWeb. Right, it is been headquartered in London. It has been headquartered in London. Okay, and which has offices at various other cities like, for example, California, Florida, Virginia, as well as some of the foreign offices also there, for example, in Dubai and the Singapore also. So the main purpose of this OneWeb is to send the constellation of at least 648 satellites, okay, to the low Earth orbit, so that the universal, the global broadband services would be provided to every corner of those in the world. So here satellite internet access would be provided through the communication satellites, right? Here the modern consumer grade satellite internet service that is typically being provided through the geostationary satellites. Now these new constellation of the satellites are being developed in the low Earth orbit that will provide the much needed the broadband services to every corner of the country. So here the low Earth orbit technology that has been having used for the purpose of providing these broadband services to every corner of the world, that has been using this technology for the purpose of sending the satellites to the low Earth orbit, and that has been deployed since 1990s, providing companies and the individuals with various communication technology. So here the satellites are basically positioned in around 500 kilometers to 2000 kilometers from the Earth, specifically in the low Earth orbit. Okay, and it has been deployed over there, right, as compared to the 36,000 kilometers away that was deployed some satellites in the geostationary orbit. So these low Earth orbits are comparatively closer to the Earth, that is around 500 to 2000 kilometers, compared to 36,000 kilometers, that is the geostationary orbit, that is much further from the Earth. Here the latency or the time needed for the data to be sent and received is basically also good for the purpose of sending these pockets of the communication to basically to the targets. So here the OneWeb that we are talking about, having lot of benefits of sending these 648 satellites of the constellation of 648 satellites in the low Earth orbit. So here the most important aspect is that OneWeb satellite constellation, that is consisting of the 648 satellites, okay, in the basically low Earth orbit, in the low Earth orbit. So almost 700 satellites will be sent. Okay, here you will have the low latency, that is almost less than 30 millisecond, right? Round trip delay. So what is the latency that we are talking? Latency is basically a measure of delay. Okay, in network, what you can say that the latency measures the time it takes for some data, okay, to get to its destination, okay, across the network. So you can say that it is usually measured as a round trip delay. Okay, the time taken for the information to get it to the destination and to get back. So it's a round trip. Okay, it's a round trip delay. Okay, so called, you can say that low latency network connection is one of that is generally experience the small delay times, while some networks will have the high latency connection, that means generally suffer from the high, the high or the longer delay. So low latency, small delay times; high latency, the longer delay times. So latency is something also referred as the ping rate. The ping rate, if you see in your browser or your broadband, you can also find out the ping, that is the ping rate, that typically measures in the form of the milliseconds. So here the typically low latency means you will have the low delays or small delay time, that is almost less than 30 milliseconds, right? Okay, then you will have the angles that is more than 57 degrees, and the last and more important is that the total throughput of the system. That throughput that we are talking, right? The throughput is basically a rate of production or the rate at which something is processed, right? You can call it as a simply speed of a system or speed of a network. Okay, so here the throughput basically is the rate of production or the rate at which something is produced. Okay, when you use in the context of communication network, what you can say that in the Ethernet or in some sort of a pocket, the packet that is being is a rate of the successful message delivery over the communication channel, right? That has been basically described in the form of the throughput of the system. Okay, then biomedical based. Now recently a report which was published by the Center for the Science and Environment recently says that in its report called State of India Environment 2021, it says that in the month of May itself, in the month of May 2021, almost 2,03,000 kg of COVID-19 biomedical waste was produced daily in the month of May this year itself. Okay, now it is the data which is being provided in the month of May, and that biomedical waste that is related to the COVID-19 is roughly 33% of India's non-COVID biomedical waste. That is very, very high. Okay, and in India, the biomedical waste are basically regulated by the Biomedical Waste Management Rule 2016. Okay, it is being required to be segregated into the 4 color code waste, right, categories. So here the different type of waste is being segregated based on the 4 colors, and these have been treated and disposed as per the methods which are prescribed in the schedule 1 of the rules. Okay, for example, the common methods in those, the 4 type of treatment or 4 type of colors that we are basically used in the biomedical waste. So first of all, the first method is basically related to the yellow category waste. This yellow category waste basically treated with the help of the incineration. What is incineration? See, incineration is destruction of something, especially the waste material, by burning. So simply you are destructing the biomedical waste by burning. Second, plasma pyrolysis. What is that pyrolysis? Pyrolysis means it's a heating of organic material such as biomass or any sort of a the biomedical waste. Okay, in the absence of oxygen. So here the incineration is basically in the presence of oxygen, but pyrolysis in the absence of oxygen. Or you can also do with respect to the deep burial. So simply you dug it deep, a pit, and then you basically buried that particular type of biomedical waste in the yellow category waste. Second is basically the red category waste. Here you can do autoclaving, microwaving, or chemical disinfections. So what is that autoclaving? See, Autoclaving, that we first of all, these all three systems, all three type of the disposal methods are basically the low heat systems, basically which operates between 93 degrees Celsius to 177 degrees Celsius. Okay, so here you will have some sort of a the hot water or steam or the electromagnetic radiation to heat and to decontaminate the waste. Okay, so here the autoclave and microwaves are basically the low heat systems. Okay, autoclaving that we are talking is basically the low heat thermal process that use the steam. So in the autoclaving we use the steam for the disinfection of the waste. Okay, so autoclaves are basically using the steam for the purpose of disinfection. Regarding microwaving that we are talking, in the microwave it is again the low heat system. In the microwave is the process where which the disinfectant disinfects the waste by the moist heat, and that steam which is basically generated by the microwave energy. And the chemical disinfection is very very simple. You use some sort of a chemical disinfectant to basically sprinkle on the waste, and that is basically disinfect that particular type of bio waste. Okay, and the high heat system that we are talking basically is basically also known as the incineration process or the hydroclaving, right? That is another type of disinfectant procedure. Okay, the another category that is called white category, where you will have the process called sterilization, the disinfection followed by the burial in the concrete pit, right, through some sort of a foundry or encapsulation. Okay, that has been done for the purpose of the white category, the biomedical base. And the last category, that is blue category, where some sort of a glass, okay, the waste will be there. So in which you will have to first of all wash them, then you will have to disinfect them, and then following you will have to recycle them for the purpose of disposing of this biomedical waste for this time. Okay, so here you will have the four types of biomedical waste. Okay, next we have the Lamu port. The Lamu port is basically is the newest mega infrastructure project, specifically in the form of Lamu port in the country of Kenya. Kenya is basically the Eastern African country. Okay, it's an ambitious transport corridor project between the Kenya, South Sudan, and Ethiopia. Okay, and this Lamu is basically is a second deep water port, right, after the Mombasa. The Mombasa is basically the largest deep water port in the Kenya. So after completion of this port Lamu, it will be the second deep water port in the archipelago of the Mombasa in the Kenya itself. Okay, so here the port, which is basically, you can say that the port basically, which is also known as the Lamu port, is is basically a part of 23 billion, the Lamu port South Sudan Ethiopia transport corridor. That is, in short, you can also call it as the LAPSET or the Lamu port South Sudan Ethiopia transport corridor. That means it involves the port Lamu. The port Lamu is located in Kenya, so it will connect the Kenya with South Sudan with the Ethiopia. So here you will have the transport corridor. So it will have a lot of infrastructure projects, like you have the railway line or the standard gauge railway line, a pipeline network, a refinery, a road network, international airports at Aslo, at Lamu, at Lokingio, right, as well as the port of Lamu at the Manda Bay in the Kenya, as well as you will have the development of resort cities. So you will have lot of infrastructural projects, that is consisting of the 23 billion US dollars of the project, total project cost. And here the project Lamu is one of such project, a part of the LAPSET or the Lamu port South Sudan Ethiopia transportation corridor. It has been constructed by the China Communications Construction Company. Here the China's ambitious project to connect, right, with one belt one road initiative, right. Here the first three was basically having the plan related to the 32 berth, which is coming out of the 367 million US dollars, the investment that was done by the China Communication Construction Company for the purpose of the Lamu project. Here the LAPSET project program is basically a regional flagship program, okay, which is intended to provide some sort of a the transport and the logistic infrastructure in this region, which is aiming at creation of the seamless connectivity between these three East African countries, like Kenya, Ethiopia, and South Sudan. So here the project connects a population of around 160 million people. 160 million people in those three countries of Kenya, South Sudan, and Ethiopia. Okay, so that's all for today. Thank you very much. We will meet again tomorrow for next current affairs. Be safe, be at your home. Thank you.